So what is evidence-based medicine? Evidence-based medicine, it all started from second half of 19th century. And this is basically integration of best research evidence with clinical expertise and patient value. The thing is, there are diseases and there are treatment for the diseases, and for the treatment the various medications are available. The thing is, diverse, because of diverse nature of the disease, based on different condition or different factors, there can be the possibility that many drugs can be used, and it all depends upon the practitioner. The practitioner has to justify the use of any one particular one or more than one drug for that specific disease. And say one disease is there, for that treatment we have a group of drug. In that 3 or 4 drugs are there. Now all 3 and 4 drugs of that group are the drugs for that particular disease, but out of 3, 4, which drug will you be choosing for the treatment? Who will decide that? That's the practitioner, right? That's the physician, or that's the respective doctor. The thing is, he should look into the disease, look about the patient, and he should relate the disease with the drug, their researches on the drug, on the disease, and then come to a conclusion that based on all the factor, analyze all the factor and then go for the drug. So when we do this, this is called evidence-based medicine. You get the evidence, you get the effectiveness based on the literature survey or the research of the drug, and then you use for the treatment of the disease. So that is, and then you take care of the value of the patient. So when you integrate the research, the clinical expertise, and then patient value together, that becomes evidence-based medicine. It improves the quality of care through the identification and promotion practice that work, and elimination of those that are effective or harmful. These are taken from these references. So there are 3 major pillars here of EBM, evidence-based medicine. We have the best available evidence. What are the absolute benefit? What are the absolute harm? And time horizon up to the benefit. If we are choosing any one particular drug, we have to go through literature. The person or the doctor has to go through the literature, has to go through the articles, and then see that if there are more than one drug to be chosen, or one drug to be chosen from many other drugs, then enough of literature survey for the effectiveness or potency should be done from the doctor side, and then it should be used. Clinical judgment is important. The person, the doctor has to see for the individualized risk profile. There is possibility that the patient would have the comorbidity, and because of one other condition which is present in the patient, one particular drug may not be used. So that judgment should be done from the clinical doctor. How would be the prognosis, and what are the social personal context? These all factors clinicians should take care before giving the drug. Obviously, patient value would be very important. Whether the person can afford it or not, what type of disease there is, that the male related, the female related, what are the socio-cultural issues of the patient, those also should be given enough of importance by the clinician before prescribing. So these are the 3 important things. When this all comes together here, this horizon is known as evidence-based medicine. When you include patient value with the best available evidence about the drug or the disease, along with the clinical judgment, then that becomes the evidence-based medicine. Now, this particular figure would be very important if any type of question is asked in your examination. So please do that. Now, there are information pyramid. As I told before prescribing, you should have enough of the knowledge about the drug, specific drug, which you are going to prescribe, and that should be based on your literature survey or the article search or the information from the books. So what are the different ways, different sources through which you can get the information about that particular drug or use of that particular drug in the disease? We have animal and laboratory studies, case report or case series. Case report and case series means actually case report is of one person, the person having the disease, and if drug A is used, what happened to the disease or what happened to the patient. If that the whole report is published in a journal, that is known as case report. Similar type of cases, 3-4 cases are put together and then published, that is known as case series. Case control studies, it's like retrospective studies. Retrospective means the disease has already happened. You want to know the reason of the disease. So retrospectively, if you study from disease to the cause, that becomes the retrospective case control study. Here cases are there and controls are there. You make a group with the case and you make a group with the control where there is no disease. Then the next is cohort study. It is prospective in nature. That means you expose a person with the cause and then see whether the person is coming out with the disease or not. So if you study that way from cause to the disease, then that becomes a cohort study. Then randomized control trial, if it's a trial of the drug where the people are divided into various groups, and this choosing of the patient would be randomized in a randomized way. And then the test drug, control drug, and standard drugs are given, and then the effectiveness is analyzed. Then meta-analysis or systemic review, it's like a review study based on the previous multicentric or single-centric trial. So they are put together to come to a conclusion. And then obviously the clinical practice and the guideline. So these type of informations are available in many journals. Okay, so the person should be, or the doctor should be going through these information and then decide on the treatment. So what are the steps or the principle of EBM? Step 1, formulating answerable clinical question. Formulating answerable clinical question. That is PICO in relation with the patient or problem. Then I for intervention, C for comparison, and O for outcome. So you have to take care of the patient or the problem. This is what disease, what problem is there in the patient, and what is the type of the patient. Then you think about the intervention. What type of intervention should I go for? Whether surgery is needed or the drug related treatment is needed, or rehabilitative treatment is needed, or counseling type of treatment is needed. So you decide for that. And then you compare, if I do this treatment and if you do that treatment, what could be the possibility, how the prognosis, in which case the prognosis would be better and the treatment outcome would be better. So you have to do that. That is step 1. Then finding the evidence. So if you have shortlisted your intervention, then go for the evidence. Check out the evidence. Okay, check out the evidence from the information from the literature sources, and then appraising the evidence. The evidences which you have found, you have to find that whether the evidences are valid, they are good enough to be incorporated or to be utilized. Are they important, or are they applicable in the present situation or not? Then if all is okay till step 3, then go with the patient's value. Patient's value. Think about the patient's condition, their socio-cultural issues, their own personal issues and all, and then you start the treatment and evaluate the performance of your chosen drug for the disease. So these are the 5 steps of principle of evidence-based medicine. For example, we have osteoporosis. Then what are the available treatment for the osteoporosis? We have osteoporosis is a disease where there is decaying of the bone density, right? So we need to treat this. Otherwise, bone would be too weak and it will, the chances of fracture and those things would be there. So available treatment are there like alendronate, risedronate, hormone therapy, vitamin D, calcitonin, raloxifene, etidronate, and calcium. So these are the available treatment. Which drug you should go for? You cannot just blindly choose a drug from this and then give the drug to the patient. You cannot. So for that, you have to go through systemic review of randomized clinical trial, single or large randomized clinical trial, small randomized clinical trial, cohort study, single case control study, prospective study, retrospective studies, case series, case report, and then collect those information and then analyze it and then choose the drug. So if you do that, you'll come to a conclusion like alendronate and risedronate. They have demonstrated convincing evidence for both non-vertebral and vertebral fracture risk reduction. So among all these things, this drug, bisphosphonate, alendronate and risedronate, they comes under a group called bisphosphonate. Those drugs are effective for the osteoporosis and they reduces the chances of vertebral as well as non-vertebral fracture. So this was all about evidence-based medicine. The next is therapeutic drug monitoring. That is TDM, therapeutic drug monitoring. With the word only, you can have the idea that you monitor the drug, you monitor the concentration of the drug so that it gives the therapy. Made with 3 words, therapeutic drug monitoring. So you need to monitor the level of the drug for the treatment of a disease. So that is therapeutic drug monitoring. It's a clinical practice of measuring the plasma concentration of a specific drug at a defined interval to maintain the desired concentration in order to optimize the dosage regimen and hence the therapy. Now, I'm not giving you any example or any name of the drug. I'll just say drug A. There, the drug A, and there is a drug B. Say drug B is a drug for which you do not need to go for therapeutic drug monitoring. So what happens here? When you give a drug, it will go bind to the receptor, it gives its action and then go off or metabolized or excreted from the body. So that is hit and run drug. So it will hit the target and it will give the effect and then go off. Here, there is no point of therapeutic drug monitoring. There is no need of therapeutic drug monitoring. It will give the effect and then go off. Now coming to the drug A. Here, the fundamental is that to get the therapeutic effect of drug A, you need to have a certain plasma concentration of that drug in the body. If that concentration is not there in the body, that means the effect will not be given. Say it is 10 to 20 microgram per deciliter of the blood. So you should give that the drug A in such a way, the dose should be such a way that it reaches the plasma concentration in between this range, 10 to 20 microgram per deciliter of the plasma or blood. So the moment it goes down below 10 microgram, then you will not get the effect. So the thing is what? You need to maintain this. How you will maintain? By giving the loading dose and then maintaining it. Okay. So that's, and here, how do you get to know that whether that plasma concentration is reached or that the plasma concentration is maintained? You can do it by measuring the concentration, taking the sample, blood sample, and then measure, and after every interval. Okay. So maybe after 1 hour or 2 hour of interval, depending upon what type of drug you are giving, you can take the sample and then see whether that plasma concentration is there or not. If not there, that means therapeutic concentration is not reached, and then you will not get the effectiveness of the drug. So a patient example is that patient differs in the dose to achieve the same response. Dose of warfarin that maintain the therapeutic concentration may vary 5 times between patient. So the effectiveness vary from patient to patient. In case of warfarin, it may vary 5 times from one patient to other patient. So you need to maintain the drug, maintain the concentration depending upon the patient condition also. Few examples where it is useful and where it is not useful. Drug with narrow therapeutic range. So these are the drug like lithium, phenytoin, and digoxin. And these are the particular plasma concentration which should be reached by the drug. So when you give a phenytoin, it reaches to the say 12 microgram per milliliter. That means it is in the range of 10 to 20. After a few hours, there would be metabolism, and the concentration will decrease. It will go on decreasing. It will obviously below go 10 also. So you need not, or you should not allow the concentration of the drug to go below the 10, that the minimum plasma concentration. In between only you have to give another dose so that the graph goes up and it remains in that concentration only. If it is more than that required plasma concentration, then also it's not good. Otherwise, it will go show the toxicity. Okay, adverse effect, unwanted adverse effect. So these are the different examples. You can remember the plasma concentration. That's very important actually. Then to check the patient compliance, if you are giving phenytoin, say that's an anti-epileptic drug, and the patient complains of that he is not getting relief, that means you need to check whether the patient is taking the drug enough or not, at enough interval regularly he is taking or not. That how can you do? You can take the sample and then check for it. If the sample, if the concentration is below, that means you can conclude that the patient is not taking the drug properly at time, and that's why he is not responding to the treatment. Diagnose and manage drug overdose. When there is an overdose of a drug, means the person is taking too often, right? So you can again take the blood sample and then check for the concentration. If the concentration is more, that means he is overdosing, right? In this case also TDM should be done. Difficult to distinguish the therapeutic and adverse effect. In this also it would be difficult when there is arrhythmia. Arrhythmia is due to the digoxin. If you have prescribed digoxin for the treatment of arrhythmia, and digoxin has an adverse effect, known adverse effect called arrhythmia. So the arrhythmia is due to digoxin or is it due to the condition only? Okay, how you know? You take the concentration of the plasma concentration of the digoxin. If it is more, that means it may produce the condition. A guide to effective therapy, that is lithium mood disorder. Again, it's the same thing. If the concentration of the lithium is maintained at this level, that means effect would be seen. So you need to check the lithium concentration to see whether the person is responding or not. Therapeutic failure, the person is not taking, obviously therapeutic failure would be there, and there is no obvious reason. So this is the reason. In that case, it would be helpful. And wide variation in metabolism. If the metabolism is too faster in me as compared to you of the same drug, in that also if I compare the metabolism, if I take the sample at regular interval at the same time of the two patients and see the plasma concentration, from that I can get to know that the metabolism is faster in me, and that's why you need to give frequent dosing in me rather than the other person. Where it is not useful, the TDM therapeutic drug monitoring is not useful where you can see the effect, like antihypertensive drug. If you can measure that blood pressure and can get to know whether drug is producing the effect or not, then what is the need of taking the blood sample unnecessarily? Same is for diuretic and hypoglycemic. If the drug is producing enough of diuresis, the urine volume is increased, that means no need to go for the blood sample testing, and so on. Hypoglycemic drugs are those drugs which decreases the blood sugar level. There is no elevation of plasma concentration with effect of hit and run drug. Like drugs like aspirin or organophosphate, they will go and hit the target and give the effect and then go off. In this case also, the therapeutic drug monitoring is not needed. Poor correlation with plasma concentration with the effect. Drugs like prodrug or levodopa or enalapril, they are the if you don't know that what is prodrug are the group of drugs which are inactive but becomes active when we take it. When we eat it, it will be metabolized. When you consume it, it will be metabolized by the liver to the active drug. So measuring the inactive component of the drug is of no use, right? So that is why the therapeutic drug monitoring is not done for the prodrug. And this useful, not useful examples are taken from Bennett and Brown 11th edition and Lippincott South Asian edition. Now coming to classification of drug is based on the chemical nature, source, target organ or the site of action where it acts, mode of action or mechanism through which it acts. There are many mechanisms, G protein, the enzyme link, the channel mediated. So many mode of action are there. So if the drugs are classified in this way, this should be known as mode of action. Then therapeutic, based on therapeutic uses, the drugs are classified. Based on physiological system, the effect on the physiological system, drugs are classified. And based on the physical effect, the drugs are classified. So there are numerous other also way of classifying drugs, but these are the most common way through which or in which the drugs are classified. We will keep checking this type of classification in different chapters. Now, the nomenclature of drug. This is very important. This is the basically the part of competency of PH 1.9. Nomenclature of drug. It's like naming of the drugs. You must be having some name which is given by your father or mother, like nickname. Okay, you are having a name or that is official name in your class 10th or 12th certificate. Okay, that's the official name. Okay, and maybe some name which is given by your friends. Okay, so these names are different. Okay, and you will classify this type of name differently. You must have watched Satyameva Jayate of Amir Khan, right? So he took out the matter, and from there all layman person also get to know that what is generic name and what is brand name. So basically, I will tell what is chemical name, what is generic name, and what is brand name, and what is the significance of these type of names. The chemical name is given based on the chemical structure of the compound or the drug. Okay. So this is the structure of paracetamol. It's a structure of paracetamol. Every chemical has their own structure, right? So aspirin acetyl salicylic acid, it is having some structure. So those structure, if given some name, then that would be known as chemical name. What is the generic name? Generic name basically is the drug which is present, which is active component of the medicine is known as the generic name. Paracetamol. If I am calling this Calpol, Calpol is a brand name, and the active component which is there in the Calpol is paracetamol. Okay? So the paracetamol is a generic name. This name is given or chosen by the official agencies like WHO. Then we have trade name. The paracetamol is sold with different name. Okay. So when they are sold, the active component is sold with different name by different manufacturer, then that becomes the trade name of the manufacturing company, like Panadol or Adol. So what is the importance of this? See, if you take, say for example, Calpol only, that drug is there in the Indian market, right? But there is every possibility that the same name drug or the Calpol is not present in United States of America or Australia or Argentina, because that company would not be there or would not be marketing the Calpol in that country. Maybe that similar company is marketing paracetamol with different name. So you will not get Calpol if you ask for Calpol in another country. Possibility is there. But paracetamol, it is a generic name. If you ask for paracetamol in any of the country, you will, maybe pronunciation would differ, but then paracetamol drug would be there in all the country, and you can get any drug if you ask for with the generic name, or not with a trade name or brand name.